Hey folks, today we're talking about We Have Always Lived in the Castle, chapters 7 and 8. I'm Professor Babcock. Let's jump in. Thursday was my most powerful day. It was the right day to settle with Charles, says Mary Cat, in her typical magical thinking way. Thursday was my most powerful day. uh, like you'd done squats like on Tuesday, and by Thursday you're good to go, Mary Cat. So and she's got this kind of like what do you call that when you look at like your star sign and you read your horoscope? She's got almost this like horoscopic view of what days she's stronger. So this fits well with all of her sort of strange voodoo witchcraft thinking, this magical thinking that she's been doing throughout the book. As we've said before, there's nothing magical happens. This is not a magical world. This isn't like Harry Potter. This book, We Have Always Lived in the Castle. So all of her thinking, the best way to interpret it, I think, is just mere delusion. That she's just kind of nuts. And what interests me about this book is that people who are as delusional as far gone. I don't mean to be cruel here, but the facts are facts. She is an unstable personality. Mary Cat is dangerously so. That can be interesting. But what always interests me is the craziness, if I can use that term, the craziness of the sane, the irrationality of rational people. Into that box, I would put Constance, I would put and Charles, who seem to be like at face pretty reasonable, rational people, but who have serious problems of their own, even if they're not so obviously kooky as Mary Cat. So these things I hope will come out as we go. Thursday was my most powerful day. So onward, chapter 7, Charles digs up a box of silver dollars. And he gets really upset about this. So again, Charles with the money, right? He says, it's not her money, he was shouting. She has no right to hide it. It's like, Charles, my guy, like, yeah, okay, that's pretty goofy of her. It's silly, but like, it's silver dollars. It's not like it's, gold bars, A, and B, like, what's it to you, bro? Like, why are you so concerned about what Connie and Mary Cat do with their money, even if it is sort of frivolous squandering weirdness? And I think that the answer is pretty clear. All he cares about is money. And it's like, his relationship to Connie should be very obviously creepy at this point. The book doesn't really come out and say this ever, but if you're paying attention, it's like Charles seems to have in his mind, he never says it out loud, but the way he talks about money, the way he talks about like getting Mary Cat under control or even dismissing her from the house, he wants to become the man of the house. He wants to sort of inherit it himself, and if he's the man of the house, who's the lady of the house? It's his cousin Connie. Like there's this weird, like you should be getting some weird incestuous vibes here, as if Charles wants to come in and marry his cousin. He never says it out loud, but like that seems to be the road that he is walking down, and it's awful. So Mary Cat, for all of her criminal insanity, is fun. Forgive me for saying so, but it's true. She's one of these anti-hero characters. Think of the Joker. I often refer to the Joker as one of these characters, like evil in an entertaining way. And when Shirley Jackson does this, she creates characters that are problematic. I think the reason she does this is to demonstrate to us, like, isn't this fun? Doesn't that disturb you that you think this is fun? Isn't that a problem that you're enjoying this as much as you are? your sympathy, your reader, dear reader, Shirley Jackson is saying, your sympathies lie with a murderous psychopath. And what does that say about you? I think Shirley Jackson is sort of quietly asking us. Sometimes writers go over the top in this. They really want, some writers want to take you by the scruff of the neck and like put your nose down in your own sin and like how dare you, you're the evil one, and like that gets really tiring really quick. But Shirley Jackson's more subtle about it. But I think it's the same. But whether Shirley Jackson, Flannery O'Connor does this. She sort of puts the question to the reader, and you think you're getting off the hook, reader, like you think you're so much better. You like this girl, don't you? Well, one of the reasons we do, if you're anything like me, one of the reasons I think we do like Mary Cat is that she's a criminal, which we're going to see in a second. But she's up, if you want to make a character likable, one trick you can do, like as a writer, is to give them a really odious villain. Like set them up against someone who's really terrible. Like if someone's pretty terrible, but they're opposed to someone who's really truly awful, okay, then that gives us more sympathy for the less bad option. Charles isn't as violent and insane as Mary Cat, but he's unlikable. He's unlikable. He's greedy. He's controlling. There's not a lot redeeming about him. At least Mary Cat's entertaining. At least she's zany and goofy. Even if, actually on paper, if you look at it, like who's the bigger criminal? It's got to be Mary Cat, right? But we like her because she's fun. Like truth hurts. And we enjoy her. Well, I hope you are. I'm kind of getting a kick out of her, even as one part of my brain is like reviled by her, the other part's like, isn't this fun? Okay, and maybe that's why we call this stuff gothic, because it's drawing out the worst parts of human nature, maybe even as a reader, my own human nature. Just saying. Okay, onward. She has no right to hide this money. Well, what's it to you, Charles? So Charles says after this episode to Mary Cat, I haven't decided what I'm going to do with you, young lady. He doesn't say young lady, but it's like that's his tone. I haven't decided what I'm going to do with you, but whatever I do, you'll remember it. So Charles is like trying to wear the daddy pants in this chapter. He's been slowly trying to do this. Connie's response is, hey, don't bully her, Charles. It's all my fault anyway. Mary Cat says this is her new way of thinking. Connie is now taking everything onto herself. She's sort of like putting all this guilt on herself, as I said in class, and I'm going to repeat now. Why do people do this? Like, don't you have enough responsibility? Why you got to put other people's responsibility on yourself? Why do you have to feel guilty? Why is it that there's a type of person who feels guilty over things that like they really, really don't need to feel guilty about, things that genuinely are not their own fault. Most people go the other way. Most people go the other way most of the time. They don't take responsibility for themselves. And then you get this strange kind of person like Connie who takes on too much guilt and shame onto herself. And it's like, why is she doing this? And I think the reason is, if she tells herself it's all her fault, then it must have been in her control. What happened to her family? What's going on now? If everything that happened is her fault, that means she did something wrong. She did something wrong to cause all this mess. Whereas the truth is even more painful than that. No, Connie, you were a pretty good sister. Nothing you did brought this on yourself, and your family died anyway. That's traumatic. Like the truth is traumatizing there. That her family died around her, and she did nothing wrong. It was not her fault. It was not her fault. It was not her fault. And yet, it was so bad. Why is that so painful? Because she was never in control. And so she tells herself, she takes all this guilt on herself, because the guilt is easier to deal with than the trauma of facing the fact that she was never in control of her sister, of her family. That's my hot take. Anyway, onward. 508, Julian, Uncle Julian. Told you not to get too attached to poor Uncle Julian. Well, he's alive in chapter 7 anyway. Spoiler. Well, he says he's working on his book, and he says kind of offhandedly, did you catch this? My niece, Mary Catherine, died in an orphanage of neglect during her sister's trial for murder. Uncle Julian's on this project of writing this book, of the sort of the true crime book he's working on. He writes all these pages. You have to wonder how good it's going to be, given how like he seems to be like not remember things well, and he doesn't quite know where he is half the time. Okay, he's suffering from dementia pretty bad here. And he says here, my niece Mary Catherine died in an orphanage. He kills Mary Catherine off in this true crime book that he is writing. So it's like he's got this project of remembering wrong. Julian has this project of remembering wrong. Okay, I'm just going to lay that there. Maybe you want to write your paper about Uncle Julian. I don't want to write it for you at this point. But like, here's a question I want you to think about. Why is he taking so much, he's putting so much time and effort into this project? It's like the project of his life at this point, writing this book, and he's like doing it wrong, and at times he seems to be deliberately doing it wrong. Why? Where does that come from? Okay, I think there's a good reason. I'll leave that to you. Maybe I'll get a good paper that answers that question. Okay, and then the big thing happens, and chapter 7 starts with, Thursday was my most powerful day. It was the right time to settle with Charles. Now, you don't say that at the beginning of chapter 7 unless in chapter 7 she does something. So, like, the writer, Shirley Jackson's making you a promise, something's about to happen, and indeed it does. What does she do? She breaks her dad's watch that, like, Charles had taken for himself. He's like taking on all their dad's things. He wants to like be their dad so that he can like rule over them or whatever, and have all their money. Really is what he seems to be after, just money. He's that kind of a guy. Well, she does that. She pours water all over his bed. She tears down the curtains so that he has to like look at the road. And she says like these bizarre things like, now he'll get lost. Now he won't know where he is. He'll get lost in this house and he'll just leave. And the way like she talks about making him lost in the house, again, magical thinking, like completely unrealistic. Many like historically, people have superstitious people, and by people I mean like groups of people, like people groups, superstitious people groups, do seem to think in this way. When superstitions happen, it's like you need to do this to get the spirits of the woods off of you. You need to go through all these rituals here, and that will make sure that the ghost gets lost and they can't follow you back into the village and stuff like this. I'm thinking of different points of medieval European history. I'm thinking of non-European people groups. This idea that like if you behave in just such a way, the spirits will get lost, or like you can pull one over on somebody in a way that makes no logical sense. What I'm trying to draw out here is, as crazy as this sounds and is, like people historically do, Mary Cat is weird to us, but there have been people groups throughout history that like take this stuff, I don't want to say take it seriously, because take it more seriously. It's not the case that like an entire group of people is always superstitious in one direction. On the other hand, different cultures have their quirks, right? Whether that's even if it's unaccepted quirks, it's like a lot of people might believe something untrue. A lot of people might be superstitious even if you're not supposed to be superstitious. And so what I'm trying to draw out here is like people really have, maybe even do is a better word, people do think this way, as crazy as it is to us, to you and me, that what you're gonna like fool him in some way. Like he knows where he is. What are you talking about? You're being superstitious. You're being bizarre. Well, this is like some people really do think like this. Shirley Jackson, I've said many times, really understands how people work, and as bizarre as it is, I think she's right. Some people do think they're going to confuse the spirits or confuse somebody they don't like in ways that make No sense. Okay, onward. So Charles talks about punishing Mary Cat. He turns to Connie and says, "Are you just gonna like let her get away with this? You've got to punish her." And like, look, did you see Mary Cat's reaction? Like, punish? Like, she doesn't run around scared much, but like this scares her. The idea of being punished, of being sent to her room without dinner, like scares her, like messes with her. She runs out of the house, runs to the summer house, and this is the most disturbing scene I think in the whole book. When she's in the summer house, the sort of like, I don't know, like a pool house or something like that, like this little cottage place, and it's run down, hasn't been in there in years. It's like overgrown at this point. She gets in there and she has this fantasy that her parents are still alive and everyone's still alive. And how does it go? Everyone says, isn't our daughter Mary Cat the best? She's the best. She must never be punished. That's right. She must never be punished. In fact, she's too good. She doesn't need to ever be punished. She's having this like weird daydream of her family alive and saying this to each other. And in the last line of this daydream is this, now bow all your heads to our adored Mary Catherine. Okay, so she's daydreaming that her family is alive. They tell each other that she can't be punished. And eventually they bow down their head like they're worshiping her. I mean, that's like end game sociopath delusion, like delusions of grandeur, thinking of her, resisting punishment is not great. If the punishment is, earned. If you are a child, if you are a 12-year-old child, and she was 12 when she killed her parents, yes, we learned that at the end of chapter 8. If you're 12 and you won't be punished and you won't be sent to your room and you act out and you lash out, like, okay, like if you kill your parents, that's one thing, that's not what I'm talking about. But if you're 12 and you can't be punished, like you will not be punished, you will not correct yourself, okay, at your parents' insistence, like that's one step on a road of rebellion. And like the last step on the road of rebellion is, I'm the queen, everyone must bow to me. Okay, she won't be controlled. She is the one that must be in control. She can't be punished. Okay, like take that out, like few years later, unspool that thread, and this is where she ends up. And she wants to be a tyrant. She acts like a tyrant. That like the impulse that leads her to not want to be punished, even in small ways, eventually leads her to, I'm the queen, bow down to me. Okay, like disturbing. Very, like this is disturbing. She's got some serious problem. Okay. So, so much for chapter 7. The ending on it is one of the most striking parts of the whole book. And then in chapter 8, let me read a passage from chapter 8. Charles still won't leave, no matter what she does. So Mary Cat's snooping around her room, and we get this. I brushed the saucer in the pipe, his smoking pipe, which is still sort of smoking a little bit. I brushed the saucer and the pipe off the table into the wastebasket, and they fell softly under the newspapers he had brought into the house. I was wondering about my eyes. One of my eyes, the left, saw everything golden and yellow and orange. The other eye saw shades of blue and gray and green. Perhaps one eye was for daylight and the other was for night. MK, like, hold up. Pause. Can we go back a second? Like, what did you just do? Like, the pipe's embers are still burning. This pipe is still smoking. And she brushes the saucer and the pipe off into the wastebasket onto newspapers. And she's like, my eyes sort of see different colors. Like, if you ever know, like, like, girly, you just set your house on fire. Okay. And again, this is how her mind works. Like, selective reality, right? I'm not trying to diagnose her with schizophrenia. I don't know that. But just etymology, I don't know that she is because I don't understand psychology well enough to make that determination. What I do know is that schizophrenia is from the Greek that literally means cut off from reality. Cut from reality. Okay? In other words, incapable of discerning what's real and what's in your head. That is where the word schizophrenia comes from. Unable to discern reality from fantasy, delusion, nightmare, dream, whatever you want to call it. Yeah. So this again, the way that this passage goes, it's just such a perfect snapshot of her completely disordered thinking. She starts a fire that's going to burn down the house, and then her next thing out of her mouth is, "My eyes are kind of funny." Like, okay. The town shows up. Indeed, the house burns. Indeed, the house burns. The town shows up. Mary Cat says this: "I saw faces laughing and faces that look frightened." She calls it Charles' fire. But anyway, the townsfolk are being classic townsfolk here. Like again, she's got these really hateable enemies. Okay, we as readers do not like Charles. We should not like him. He's not a good guy. We don't like the townspeople. Like you're like, okay, this girl is off a rocker. Like Connie's got some issues, and Charles is a real piece of work. But like Uncle Julian, like he actually has dementia or something. Like this is not something to smile and cheer about. Like, but the townsfolk are just so malicious that this helps us have a little bit more sympathy even for crazy Mary Cat. Okay, I saw faces laughing on 5:17. On 5:18, why not let it burn? One woman says directly to the fireman. The fireman kind of laughs like, well, we kind of got to, but like, yeah, like just hateful. They really despise this family. It's pretty ugly. And I mean, eventually it escalates. The fire is going on, and what does everyone do? Do they rush to help? No. The townspeople run inside and start throwing their silverware, start throwing their plates, the glasses, just smashing everything up. Okay. Finally, Jim Clark, remember Helen Clark? They have this, they have the tea party or whatever in chapter 2. Jim and Helen roll up, and it's Jim that like imposes order on the chaos. Everybody's going berserk, like breaking things, laughing at the misfortune of these people, or the misfortune as if it's luck that caused the fire, which it wasn't. Laughing at all this, and it's Jim that like is the grown-up in the situation and says, "What are you doing? Stop, stop, stop!" And he imposes what order there is to impose. And it's he, Jim Clark, sort of the one decent authority figure, if you can put it like that. Is that the word authority to use? I think maybe. He shows up, and it's he that declares Julian dead. And the first question is, did Mary Cat kill him? Like, was he burned? No. He was dying, and he just died. Like, this might have been what tipped him over the edge, but he had been dying, and he is now dead. Okay, and so the girls, the young women, no longer girls. Connie and at the end of chapter 8, we get this revelation. The whole time we've been thinking, it's been suggested to us that it's Connie who killed everyone, who killed their family. She seemed so good on the outside. Maybe this is her dark secret on the inside, if she's one of these crazy Blackwoods. Well, the truth is that the crazy person is crazy. And we get this line. Mary Cat says, "One of our mother's Dresden figurines is broken." By the way, Dresden, it's a city in Germany. Dresden was firebombed in World War II, like horrifically. Just the entire town burned to the ground, and it wasn't like a strategic point. Kurt Vonnegut, famous 20th century writer, writes about this. There was no real reason to burn Dresden in World War II. It's not like that had strategic value or ended the war quicker, but it just burned, and it was just like one of the absurdities, one of the horrors of wars, that a whole city of Germans burned for no reason, at least in Vonnegut's mind. I mean, if you really want to play devil's advocate here on Dresden, it's like, well, hey, like, you throw in your lot with the Nazis, Germany, like, consider what happened to the Jews. Maybe some of that's not just on the Gestapo's head. Maybe that's on the head of the people who voted Hitler into office. And Hitler was voted into office. Consider that. Remember that. Hitler was voted into office. Whew. Okay. Anyway, so the idea that this figurine from the town of Dresden, I think that's meant to, evoke the history of Dresden, which is it was completely razed during World War II. It was burned, just as the castle is now burned. So they pick up the Dresden figurine and it's broken. And Mary Cat speaking here, and I said aloud to Constance, I'm going to put death in all their food and watch them die. Constance stirred and the leaves rustled. The way you did before? She asked. It had never been spoken of between us, not once in 6 years. Yes, I said after a minute, the way I did before. Okay, so the revelation. It was something that they just didn't talk about. I mean, between Connie and Mary Cat, both of them know who did the poisoning. If it's Connie, it wasn't me, because if it's Mary Cat, it was me. That between them, they knew. They just never said it out loud. So we get the revelation here. No, it really wasn't Constance. It really was the 12-year-old. This 12-year-old girl murdered her family with rat poison. Okay, so I mean, Mary Cat is a murderer. She's a killer, and not just a killer, but a killer of her own family. Who did, they didn't seem to be super good parents, but it's not clear that they were actively abusive. Maybe kind of jerks, but I think clearly they Shirley Jackson's trying to draw out that Mary Cat did this pretty unprovoked. She did this because she couldn't be punished. Okay, and again, so what do we call that? What's really wrong with Mary Cat? I think it's got to be pride, not and I want to stop shy of arrogance. It's not like she thinks I'm the best, I'm the prettiest, I'm the most beautiful, I'm the most talented. We never really get that kind of thinking from her. Arrogance isn't the right word for that. I think it's just pride. I think it's if I'm Mary Cat, I cannot be corrected, I cannot be punished, I always get my way. Did you see there's going to be a twist? Look at what she's allowed and not allowed to do in the final chapters of the book as we go forward. Look at what she's allowed to do and not allowed to do. When you learn that it's really Mary Cat who did the poisoning, it's not Connie as we may have suspected. In retrospect, their relational dynamics, I think, really shift. Why was Connie in chapter 7, chapter 8, completely unwilling to punish Mary Cat? Now you know. Connie does, she figures she can keep Mary Cat in check. She'll just be nice to her all the time. Connie is a hostage. Connie is a hostage. She considers everything to be her fault. This is Connie's delusion. It's the way that she can tell herself that she has some control over her murderous sister, and there's some truth to it. Don't rock the boat won't rock. Okay, but the truth is, it's not Connie it's not Constance who's in control. It's Mary Cat. She's the killer, and she will kill again. She won't. You cannot tell her what to do, or else she'll kill you, and that's that. Okay, so why don't we end there? Can keep going. I hope to talk to you soon. We'll see how the weather goes on this snow day. It looks like we might be in this position for a while. Hopefully I'll see you all Thursday in person. If not, I'll catch you on YouTube. Keep reading. Peace.